So how do we want to do this? I think, so given that I've already made the high-low tier list, I'm probably going to go a little less in depth on the champs that are more or less unchanged. So if you end up watching this in future, and you want more thoughts on a champ that I didn't talk enough about, if you go to the tier list I made roughly a week ago on the same channel, you should be able to find it. I'm mostly going to talk about champions that I think are much different in lower elos, or are, you know, much high or much, weaker in lower elos compared to high, or are much more difficult or something like that. So it's basically just like, if there's a difference, I will talk about it. What is low in your context? It's aimed at elos iron to platinum, but the way I kind of see it is, I think it sort of scales. You know, like as you get closer to higher ranks, the champs in the lower low tier list will probably tend or trend, I guess, a little more towards what the high low tier list looks like. So I guess before we really get into it, I want to talk about what I think is really important in low elo. So the overall thing to understand about lower ranks is that ease of execution is really, really, really important. And people kind of confuse ease of execution with mechanical difficulty. Obviously, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. So there are... A champion that is like a really good champ in low elo would be something like Malzahar. So Malzahar has a very easy win condition of basically just like group up and 5v5, and the champ itself is very, very easy to play, right? So that's like a brand, Malzahar, Swain, stuff like this. These are like peak low elo champs. Now, there are some champs that have relatively simple mechanics, but actually have a pretty difficult game plan. So something like Victor would be a good example, or another example could be maybe something like Corki. I think these champs are not as good. They're still decent because mechanically they're rather simple, but I think their game plans are more complicated, and I don't think you want that. Generally, champions that can just group up in 5v5, and if they also scale, tends to be very, very strong. It's champs where you've got some like niche win condition of like you've really got to snowball your lane, or you've got to be very careful about choosing fights. Things that complicate the game beyond just group up and 5v5 on Dragon, those things tend to be a little bit weaker. Oh, one more thing I'll quickly add, champions with some forgiveness is quite nice. So there are still some champions that have like relatively difficult win conditions and stuff, but they might be kind of forgiven on the way there. And I actually think a good example of something like that would be Ahri. So like Ahri is a little harder than people think because she is skill shot reliant, and you kind of have windows you can fight on. Like you've got to be kind of careful fighting without ult and stuff. But ultimately, Ahri is a very forgiving champion, right? Like she has so many dashes, she's got sustain, she's got great wave clear, got MS in her kit. So she has a lot of chances where even if you're making mistakes, you'll probably live, and that's really, really nice. Ahri, as per usual, is probably in S tier, mainly because she's just super, super forgiving. You know, there's so much forgiveness built into her kit with the move speed, with the dashes, with the wave clear, all that sort of stuff. I do think Ahri is maybe slightly lower in S tier than some of the other champs, just because she does have some skill shots, and so there are some things you can miss. I still think it's kind of hard to like truly mess up the game on Ahri though, so I want to say it's probably about here still. Maybe lower in S tier though, there's definitely some easier champs. Okay, Akali. Akali, probably one of the champs that has the biggest differences in low rank compared to high rank. So Akali is insanely good as a counter pick in high ranks, but the reality is this champ is too hard for low elo, ultimately. She's just too difficult to play. Like, she has a difficult game plan. You've got to be very careful about fighting around your ulti and stuff. And farming is also not easy on this champ. And I've coached a lot of low elo Akalis, and they just straight up have no gold. Like, actually none. And I will say Akali got a bit easier with Gunblade, so maybe there's an argument for like a low C. But the short form is, it's much easier to climb on other champs out of low elo, I think. Akshan's probably, I want to say about a B. I think Akshan is harder to play than people think, but I don't think he's like insanely hard. I'm not quite sure where to put Akshan. I might change him as we go on. I do think that I mean, you can snowball low elo games really easy, which is nice, but I also think that if you're lower elo, knowing when to roam is pretty difficult, and I think it's easier just to play a champ that farms and groups up in team fights, and Akshan isn't really that, so I could see an argument for this being higher on the list, but I'm probably going to put it about here, just because I think the game plan is a little more complicated than people realize. So we'll leave that. Anivia, probably an A, I think. Anivia is very strong in all elos at the moment, but the reason I think she's quite good in lower elo as well is because she is a good 5v5 champion, and she is incredibly hard to punish. So Anivia's got great wave clear, she builds very tanky, it's super easy to neutralize any laning phase. I think the one negative of Anivia that kind of keeps me out of S is she is immobile, and I think a lot of you in lower ranks could have issues with that. But overall, this champ is really, really good. And especially if you want something in your pool that counters kind of like assassins or melees or anything that has burst, basically, Anivia is a pretty easy option into that. Annie. Okay, I'm actually going to put Annie in S tiers. So this one might be a little controversial, funnily enough, because for the last, I don't know, the last few low elo tier lists I've made, I've actually put Annie lower. And the reason is that I think Annie's been a little more difficult than people think. You know, there's stuff like bear micro and using your E to, you know, you get the move speed, dodge skill shots, harass, all that sort of stuff. But I would actually say with DFT, Annie is really easy. She's back to being really easy. And the reason is you can basically just Q your opponent on cooldown, and there isn't actually much they can do into that. So I think on my last few choices, I put Annie as like a mid-A or something, or even a B for low elo, but I'm back to thinking Annie is just an S. I'm pretty sure this champ is really broken in all ranks right now, and she's pretty easy. And it's also very nice to just group up in 5v5. Only real downside I think of Annie is the wave clear is not the best, so if you don't farm well early, it could be hard to farm later. But yeah, I think it's great. Okay, Sol. Scaling is very, very OP in low ranks, just in general. I think that if you have the outscaling win condition, it's super nice. The biggest weakness of Sol in high ranks is he's not really blindable, but in low ranks, it's not much of an issue. People don't know how to play the matchups. It's very easy for you to neutralize if you know what you're doing, and you just kind of scale and get to win. I think he's a little hard still, which again is, I think, is the only reason I don't put him in S. Like, it is easy to mess this champ up, like W in at the wrong time and die, you know, mess up your farming, I don't know, roam off tempo, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think I'll quite put him in S because he doesn't literally auto win you the game. But yeah, it's pretty solid. Okay, Aurora. I'm gonna, maybe this might be controversial as well. I think I'm only gonna put Aurora in B tier for low elo, and reason basically is that while Aurora does have like a lot of forgiveness in her kit, kind of similar to Ahri, I think it's very easy to overcommit on this champ and die. You know, like Ahri has multiple dashes, so like if you dash in, sometimes you can dash out, right? But as Aurora, it's like if you're Wing in or you're Ring in, you're probably fairly committed to the play. And I think it's, yeah, really easy to throw the game on this champ. Also, her combo is pretty missable. Like, I think Aurora Q is it's like one of the harder abilities to hit in the meta, at least like off the top of my head. It's like suspiciously short range. It almost feels like it should be ever so slightly longer range. It'd probably just be too OP. And so if you're not proccing your combos correctly, I can easily see you falling behind and not like automatically scaling in the way something like an Sol would. So we'll probably put her at about B. I think Ahri is a much easier version. Same with Annie of Aurora. But she is a good champ. Like, if you know how to play Aurora, I think she really pops off. She's just harder maybe than you think. Azir, pretty obviously just a D tier champ. Like, he's too hard for the most part. He does scale, which is the one nice thing, and I guess you don't get punished for your lane, so there are some things going for him. But I think the champ is ultimately just still too hard. I would probably stay away from Azir. People always ask me, like, what rank should I be when I start playing Azir or something, or when I start playing these difficult champs? It's kind of a hard question to answer because I'm kind of the opinion that if you really enjoy a champ, you should probably just play it, because ultimately the game is meant to be fun. And I also think that in pretty much any elo right now, playing Azir will put you at a slight disadvantage, because even in the highest ranks, like, Azir is quite good in high ranks, but it's still not as good as stuff like this, right? And ultimately these champs are easier than Azir. So I don't think you're ever gonna be at the point, even if you're high rank, where it's like, you know, you're playing the literal best champ in the game. I don't think that's the case. So you're kind of just signing up for this. You're realizing that, yeah, this champ is really hard, but it's really fun. You love playing it, and you can definitely climb on it, you know? So that's kind of my take on that. Best time to start playing a champ is now. Yeah, I fuck with that. I will fuck with that. Brand. Okay, guys, this is the easiest S tier of my life. I'm pretty sure Brand is, I think, the single best, maybe even across all roles, the single best champion to play in low ranks right now. Brand, I think, as a high rank mid, can sort of struggle in some matchups, and he does have some weaknesses in high-low, but any weakness Brand has does not get punished in low-elo. Very easy to lane on, super easy to teamfight on. Even if you die, you deal shit tons of damage. Your items are amazing as well. Like, they're very tanky. They've got great build paths. So Brand is just, it's insane. If you're not playing Brand mid, you're missing out. It's free elo, especially if you're lower rank. DFT exists now. Yeah, made him even better. He was already S tier in low elo, and now it's completely insane. Okay, we'll do Cassio. Cassio, I think, is a C tier. I probably won't put it quite as low as D. I do think it's a little easier to win games on Cassio compared to these. I still think it's one of the harder champs to play in the game. But I think Cassio's a little more forgiving than some people realize. Like, she does have healing in her kit. She builds relatively tanky. Short range can definitely be an issue, and immobility, but because she has those other strengths I've mentioned, I think you can kind of make it work. If you wanted to put this in D tier, I could probably see the angle. But I think it's slightly easier than these, especially in low ranks. And you can farm on this champion a lot easier as well, which makes a big difference. I'll come back to some of the off-meta mids later because there are definitely some things like Cho that I think are quite good. I will do Diana. Diana is very, very good in low ranks. I think that this champion is underrated even in Challenger. Yeah, underrated even in Challenger. But in low ranks, just because she's super easy to play, I think she absolutely deserves a spot in S tier. I did a lot of Diana videos in the past, and I did unranked to Master on her as well, so definitely have a look at the Diana videos if you want. I made a guide last year, which is slightly outdated. I do think nowadays you should take Electrocute Ignite, and you can snowball like basically any game. I think Ekko is very similar playstyle to Diana, but I would say it's quite a bit more difficult. I want to put Ekko as like a high B or maybe even an A. So here's the thing with Ekko. Ekko does have some forgiveness to his kit. He has a lot of movement speed. He has a shield. He has ult. So there's a lot of things where Ekko can kind of get away with shit. But I also think that it's just not quite as straightforward as Diana, which makes me think that it shouldn't go as high. And also, I think Diana, so both Diana and Ekko are really, really good at sidelaying, right? Like you can just absolutely destroy turrets and it's super good. I think Diana is not as reliant on side laning though. You know, like if you don't know how to side lane and you're low elo and you just group up and fight, I think you'll still be kind of useful on Diana. I think if you just spam group up and fight as Ekko, you won't be that useful. You need flanks, which you don't really need on Diana, or you don't need as much rather. And yeah, so I think just like more difficult version of Diana though. But he's not bad. I think he's definitely not bad. Fizz, I think another pretty good low elo champ. The only thing that keeps me out of S tier for Fizz is probably that he kind of falls off. And again, one of the biggest mistakes I see in low elo is people roaming at wrong times, and Fizz really encourages roaming. And I'm not saying you shouldn't roam on Fizz. What I'm more saying is that, like, if you don't know when to roam, it's an easy way to throw the game. So I think we're probably going to put Fizz, like, maybe about here. I kind of tempted to put him higher than Ekko, maybe, but somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in here, basically. He's good, but there are easier assassins and more forgiving assassins, I think. Galio. What do you think of Galio? I think Galio is also an A. I could maybe see a world where Galio is S because like Galio's skirmishing is so good. I think the big thing that keeps me away from Galio and S is his laning phase is actually more complicated than people realize, especially if you lane into something that's not just like a mage that you can tank with, you know, super sustain. I think I'll put him somewhere in here. He also doesn't scale that well. He is really good into other assassins though. Like if you wanted to use Galio as a counter pick, I think that would feel a lot better in lower ranks. But if you want to use him as a one trick, I think he's not quite as high up on the list. We'll do Hwei. Hwei, I'm not totally sure where to put. I think I'll put him in B. So Hwei is, I think, actually easier than people think. Hwei, most of his difficulty comes from just being quite unique, right? Sort of weird champ. But I still think his abilities are kind of hard to hit. They're inconsistent, you know, like his ult is very slow. It's easy to pick the wrong combo in like an intense situation. I just don't think he does as consistent AoE damage as something like Brand. And so, like, you can definitely climb on Hwei, don't get me wrong, but it is just so much easier to play one of these champs in comparison. So we'll probably leave him about there. Obvious reasons, guys. Irelia is a D tier for lower ranks. I will say, if you're really, really good at the game and really good at Irelia, Irelia is probably one of the single best champs to 1v9 games on. So in that sense, if you're an absolute demon at it, you would climb out of low elo. But I think the thing is, and this people don't realize this, it's climbing. The easiest way to climb is not 1v9ing. Actually, 1v9ing is probably the hardest way to climb. If you just play consistently and you play champs that are good most of the time, that is for sure the easiest way to climb. Because if you want to play one of these 1v9 champs, you're not really allowed to make any mistakes. The trade-off, right, is that if you don't make any mistakes, you have huge impact. But the reality is, if you're a low elo player playing in low elo, you're going to make mistakes. So I would stay away from Irelia. It's a sick champ, and I love her, but it's not a good champ for winning. Jayce, I think, kind of similar to Cassio. I don't think quite as bad as like these here. But he's not an easy champ. I guess the one good thing that Jayce has is like a lot of the bad matchups for Jayce are quite difficult champs to play. And so in high elo, like that's not really relevant, right? Because people will be able to play the champs. You don't really blind pick Jayce in high ranks because there's too many mages. But all those things like Syndra or, you know, I guess that's the main one, Syndra. But there's other ones too, LeBlanc. These are difficult champs and you probably won't have to worry about them in lower ranks. So it's probably okay. I'd still encourage you guys to pick an easier AD mid, though. There's much easier AD mids. So Kassadin, I've been a Kassadin hater for a long time, but I put it quite a bit higher on my my regular tier list than I did before. And I am kind of tempted to put Kassadin in S tier. I know this is a really hot take because I've put it in D tier like so many times. But Kassadin is back to scaling really well with the Manamune build. There was a while here where he basically didn't scale, or at least it didn't really feel like it. But I think nowadays it scales really well, the Manamune build. I think with DFT, you're actually a lot stronger early. The champ is relatively simple to play, as long as you can get through the early levels. There is a skill component for that, and maybe there's a little bit of side laning that you need to learn, but I think Kassadin's really good. It went from being trash to kind of similar to Smolder. It got like 2 major buffs with Rune Change and then the new item, to make it like way better. So I think Kassadin's back, especially in lower ranks. Katarina, probably a B as well. Katarina's a very difficult champ, but I will also say that she gets fed in low elo very easily, and she is good at just like grouping up and 5v5ing. So I think just because she's one of the more difficult assassins, I won't put her super high on the list, but she's really good, obviously, if you're good at her. Another champ like Irelia, where she's just like crazy 1v9. If you're insane at her. LeBlanc, I think, kind of tempted to put LeBlanc in D tier, to be honest. LeBlanc is a very hard champion to play. She has a lot of forgiveness in terms of dashes, but it's also very unforgiving because if you fall behind, you become completely useless. Like, if Ahri falls behind, she will always have charm, and it's also harder to fall behind on Ahri, and she has much better wave clear. If you fall behind on LeBlanc, you may as well leave the game. You're going to be completely useless unless you get some random shutdowns. And she's also just like way more difficult than the other 2v2 champs. So I think she's an absolute D tier. Okay, Lissandra. This champ, probably an S. Yeah, I think probably an S. So Lissandra ticks a lot of the boxes. Just really easy 5v5 win condition. Just group up and like drop all your abilities and deal a shit ton of AoE damage. Lissandra's biggest weakness in high ranks is mage matchups, and you won't face those as often in low ranks. Any matchup that would normally require jungle attention that you may not get in low elo, you should be able to win 1v1. I think Lissandra is also a little bit better now because Comet, I think, so you should still mostly go electrocute on this champ, but Comet is quite good in her, like even better than before now. And so there's going to be some matchups where, mage matchups maybe, where you might want to take Comet. But yeah, I think it's an S tier. I'm not quite sure where in S. Might even put it above Ahri, honestly. Might put it somewhere like that. I think it's really good. This champ is so OP. Lux. To me, this is another S tier champion. I would probably put it somewhere... Honestly, I think it's easier than any. I think I'll put Lux like right about there. I think Lux is insanely good for lower ranks. Very hard champion to punish. Basically fake skill shots. Super high impact because you can throw out 10 Qs, and as long as you hit one of them, you'll probably kill that guy because you can just immediately follow up with ult and they're like dead or as good as dead. They're out of the team fight. Only real difficulty I think of Lux can be playing some of the assassin matchups, and that's not super Lux specific. That's just... you know, you've got to kind of know what to do with the wave and stuff. And once you get to 6, you don't have to interact anymore. So it doesn't take that long to get to that point. But there is, I think if you're going to fuck up the game, it's going to be pre-6. If you can get away with that, though, yeah, Lux is great. Absolutely insanely broken champ for lower ranks. Malzahar, similar reasoning. Malzahar is probably pretty close to being the best. I'll put him alongside Brand, I think. So... Malzahar is the champion, I think, with the most difference between high rank and low rank. And the biggest difference is because Malzahar in high ranks is very abusable pre-6. And if Malzahar is really behind by pre-6, he really struggles to get to the point where he kind of can't interact. But in lower ranks, you just get away with it. You get to your chapter for free. And honestly, guys, if Malzahar spawned in at, say, like level 7... just spawn in like that with level 7 in a chapter, this champion would be OP, but he has such a weak pre-6 that he just can't get away with it in high ranks. But you should definitely abuse it in lower ranks, especially with DFT now. It's super good, great scaling, shit tons of damage, really good items to build. Just be a tiny bit careful itemizing too defensively. Some of the Malzahars I see going Zhonya's and shit, generally not worth it. You can just opt into building damage, like your items are already giving you a lot of health with Riley and Leandry and stuff. And sometimes you can even drop the Rylai for more damage as well. So there's a lot of things you can do with build, but yeah, the champ is very, very easy, I think, and does a lot. Mel... I think Mel's probably a little bit better in lower elo than she is in high elo, and that's mainly because it is quite easy to get fed, and it's also a little easier to last hit. So I could see some argument for Mel being a little better, but if I'm honest, guys, like, I just don't really value Mel. I think Mel's damage is very inconsistent, especially later on in the game, mostly because people get a lot of movement speed and dashes. I could see that being less of an issue in lower rank. I'd say this one I'm somewhat not confident on. I rated her D tier in my regular tier list, but I'd say for lower ranks, I mean, she's definitely not as hard as some of these champs. It probably sneaks into B. I don't mind if you play Mel in lower ranks, but I do think there are definitely way easier champs to climb on. I'll do Naafiri. Should be S, I think, right alongside Diana. Probably even easier than Diana, actually. I don't know. Anyway, right next to it. Basically, she's AD Diana. She is the easiest AD pick that you could pick up. If you're looking for an AD in your champion pool, this is probably it. She's also a flex in the jungle, which kind of helps a little bit with blinding if that's something you're having issues with. Easier to farm from range. You can go D shield if you need to. Just a lot of options, and the kit itself is very, very simple. So, love Naafiri. Absolutely great champ for climbing. I'll put Morgana on here. I don't think I put Morgana on my high-low tier list at all, but just because she's quite easy, I think I will put her on here. I am going to put Morgana maybe a little lower than I did before, and the main reason is I just think Brand and Malzahar do what Morgana does, but just way better. So if you want to play Morgana, you definitely can. The champ is not bad, especially in lower ranks, but honestly, guys, there are easier, even easier, if you can believe that, versions of Morg, and they do even more. You know, they do even more damage. They bring even more CC and utility. So I just recommend playing these. Ori. So Ori, I think, is another champ that is hugely polarizing between high elo and low elo. Ori is a great champ for learning, and she's extremely broken. I don't even want to say in high elo. She's just extremely broken, but she is very hard. I think I'm probably going to put Ori in C tier. Kind of, yeah, just very difficult champion to play, both from a champ and kind of mid lane perspective. There's just a lot that you need to do, and there's definitely more consistent champs to play. Yeah, like if you just want to play a major, there's so many better options. She is a great champ for learning the game, though, as I said. So if you want to really punish yourself, you could play Ori, but it is hard. Maybe she shouldn't quite be C tier. I might put her a little higher than Mel. I think this is a little more fair, maybe. But honestly, guys, Brandon Malzahar, that's the way. Brandon Malzahar. I will put Pantheon on here. I think Pantheon's pretty good. Pantheon scales a lot better than people give him credit for, and I think he's one of the better AD champs to play. I still think Naafiri's kind of the premier one, but Pantheon's pretty good. Definitely put him on there. I think, again, guys, just be careful not to roam too much, but I think he's quite solid. Qiyana, probably a little lower in A. I think a little more difficult to play for sure compared to things like Naafiri. I think the combos are relatively easy, but playing the lane can be hard. Choosing when to roam can be kind of hard. It is easy to be quite inconsistent one team fight to the next. You can be really powerful one and then kind of useless to the next. I still think she gets fed quite easily. She does bring a lot of AoE as well. So, I don't know. Either high B or low A. I don't think I can put her in A. I feel like she's just... I see her next to things like Galio Morgana. I'm like, wow, these champs are so much easier. I think I'll put her as a high B. Then we'll keep going. Ryze. I want to talk about Ryze quite a bit. So Ryze is a champion that is extremely good in ultra high ranks. And the main reason for that is because he basically guarantees mid-prior, which allows your other lanes to trade really well. He synergizes great with your jungler. He's a really awesome side laner. He's got point-and-click gank set up. There's a lot of things going for Ryze, but they're all, one, kind of hard to pull off, and two, somewhat coordination required, which is kind of a bad thing in solo queue in general, let alone lower ranks. And when it comes to kind of ease of execution and just like winning games, I think it's pretty tough. I don't think it's quite as bad as these champs, but I still think it's quite hard. I would recommend you guys stay away from Ryze unless you really, really love him, because you are making the game hard for yourself. But yeah, there's something to him, I suppose. I'm almost tempted to put him in D tier, honestly. It's very, very close, I think. What do we have next? Okay, I'm going to put Seraphine on here now because I think Seraphine's really, really good, actually. So I think Seraphine is just an OP champion, full stop. I think mid is probably her weakest role, but I still think in lower ranks it's very, very good. She's insane in AD. She's insane in support, especially right now. The main reason is just because she brings exactly what you need in lower ranks. She brings like the AoE 5v5, very easy to play. biggest weakness of Seraphine is getting countered and just outscale for free. Things like Yarn or Syndra, stuff like that. But I think you'll get away with that in lower ranks most of the time. And it's a flex, which is nice. So definitely somewhere in S or maybe a high A. I do think she's easier, though, than those champs. So we'll put her as a high A. I think Seraphine's really good. Next, we will do Swain, another S-tier champ. Not sure where in S. I think it should be pretty high. I want to say Swain's right about there. Swain will always be an all-time low elo pick because he's mechanically very simple, and all you have to do is creep up in 5v5. The only reason you don't see Swain more in high ranks is because his laning phase into mages suck, but again, you can get away with that in lower ranks, and it'll be fine. He's also a flex pick, which is nice. So I rate Swain very highly. Ooh, Sylas. Maybe hot take. I almost want to put Sylas in D tier. I think that's not quite fair. I think I'll put him in C. I think Sylas is a very overrated champ in general, and I don't really like him in lower ranks because he is hard to farm on. You need to like really consistently skirmish. You need to choose your fights very carefully, you know, like kind of know when to fight and stuff. I will say once Sylas gets fed, it becomes quite easy, but getting fed on Sylas can be difficult, and it is, I guess, easy to throw your lead as well. And because low elo games will go a long time, I don't think Sylas' late game scaling is as consistent as other champs. Depends on your ults. Sometimes you have an ult that scales really well, or several, but it's definitely not as consistent. Syndra, ooh, I'm a little polarized on Syndra. Let me talk about this one for a sec. So, I think in the past, when I've done low elo tier lists, I've almost always put Syndra in S tier. And I'm kind of tempted to put her there again. Main reason is that she scales incredibly well. Like, Syndra has one of the most, not like AFK scaling, but even if you're behind, you'll still scale into the game as Syndra, which a lot of you don't. And I think Syndra, because she scales so well, actually becomes quite forgiving. Like, even though Syndra has a high skill cap of, like, knowing how to use her combos, and, like, she is very skill shot reliant, the reality is you kind of get to a point where your stun just covers the whole screen, and you, even if you're really bad at Syndra, you can still pop off. I think just because she is immobile and skill shot reliant, and kind of has a higher skill cap, I might put her at the very top of A. But honestly, I can see a very good argument for her being S as well. Like, if you're going to be a one-trick, I think Syndra is one of the best. Just because, like, if you put a little bit of time into it, it'll be very, very rewarding. She is kind of risky blind, but it's... Again, the champ is so OP that it's still very workable. We're up to Taliyah. Okay, Taliyah, another sort of controversial one, I think. I think Taliyah is a really hard champ to play, skill cap-wise. I think Taliyah's skill floor is a lot lower than people realize. Even if... And I've always said this every single time I've made this low elo tier list. I believe you could get Diamond on Taliyah without ever skilling your W or your R and just throwing out Qs and Es because she does so much damage with just these two abilities. The one thing I will say is I think Taliyah is far less blindable in low ranks than it is in high ranks because you do not get the... You don't get the vibes on your team, you don't get the Zinzals, and neutralizing assassin matchups and stuff can be quite hard. So I think if you use Taliyah as a counter and you don't play her in Assassins, she's probably somewhere mid-A. But I think we'll probably put her in the very low end of A or maybe again at the very high end of B. I think she's broken though. Like I think Taliyah is truly broken, especially in high rank. She's just, yeah, she is quite unforgiving, especially in the laning phase. I don't know, where should I put her? I'll put her to high B. I might end up coming back. Where am I? Talon. I think Talon's actually probably pretty good in low ranks. Yeah, I think Talon's like a low A. I don't know, or maybe a high B. I just think that most of the weakness of Talon in higher ranks is like the laning phase, right? And that's why you play him in jungle. But I think in lower ranks, it's going to be pretty easy to get fed consistently. And then I honestly think most of the reason Talons will lose in low elo will be from shooting themselves in the foot and roaming too much at bad timings. Maybe a high B just because of that roaming factor. But I think I could definitely see Talon being very good. Like, if you know how to play Talon, it's a great champ to snowball in the game. I just think very similar to Katarina, where there's a lot of room to also lose the game or, like, fuck yourself. And that's kind of bad. We want lots of forgiveness. But he is a credible champ for snowballing. TF. Okay, TF probably also around about here. So TF, mechanically, very, very simple, right? Obviously, game plan is quite complicated, though. And you've really got to be good at side laning to play TF. And I think most people that, you know, play TF and low elos probably aren't doing that. So, I don't know. He's a great champ to learn the game on, but there's, again, much easier win conditions to play. Veigar. Where should we put Veigar? I think Veigar is just, like, not that good as a champ. if I'm honest. But I do think he's relatively simple. I guess the biggest reason I don't like Veigar and low elo is because he has a lot of bait builds, honestly. I see a lot of people just going Roa, Seraph, Deathcap, and just being useless for like 20 minutes. That's what I normally see when I'm coaching Veigar players in lower ranks, is they're just a complete bot for the first 20 minutes. And the reality is the early game matters quite a bit. The skirmishing, the laning, you know, even just having pressure on the map for vision and stuff like that. So I don't know, if you're building a more aggressive build, like maybe Rocket Belt or something on Veigar, and you're not going Roa Seraphs, I could see it being better. But I don't see most people having a lot of success on Veigar. I don't. So I'm not going to put him higher. I'm going to leave him there. Maybe a little further along. Let's put him like right here. But yeah, he can be useless for a very long time. Vel'Koz, probably just too difficult to champ. I might put him here rather than here, just because I do think Vel'Koz scales pretty well. But he is a mobile, which is a big downside. There's a lot of assassins in low rank. People get fed very randomly. Kind of tempted to put him all the way in D tier, but I think just because he does scale pretty well, I might put him in C. The argument, though, for being in D. Okay, what do we got next? Vex. Alright, Vex is a pretty good champ for low ranks. I'm going to put her probably in A. This champ is very simple. I do think I guess if there is difficulty to Vex, it comes from knowing when to engage, which can be kind of difficult. It's not stuff like Brand, where you can kind of go in and then die and it's still fine. You'll still deal lots of damage. I think when you're playing Vex, if you go into the wrong time, you can just end up being useless, either because you're too far away from your team, or you just kill someone that doesn't actually matter, or you miss your ult. So there is some potential to fucking this up, but I think overall it's still a pretty easy champ, which is nice. Victor, like I said, got way better with the patch. Deathfire is insanely good on him, and that has made him just, honestly, 10 times better champion. I think Victor mechanically is very simple, which is nice, but the biggest downside of Victor is his game plan is a little complicated. You really do need to shit on your lane as Victor to be useful in the mid game. I do think DFT makes that easier, though. It makes your mid game better, and it makes shitting on lane easier. So I kind of think he should be a low A. Previously, I think I've put him mostly in B, but I think I'll put him in A. He scales well. He's got a good 5v5. He does pressure lane. I don't know. You've got to be quite careful choosing fights, though, because you are just, like, kind of useless early. I don't know. It's similar to Taliyah. It's a very strong champ now, but it has some major pitfalls, and you've got to be very careful of those. I think I'll put him top of B. I think I'll just leave him there. I might come back and change that, though. I'm not sure. Vlad. Where am I going to put Vlad? So Vlad is easy mechanically, but quite a difficult game plan. You're pretty useless early. You've really got to find flanks. You've got very specific windows you can fight on with your sums up and stuff. Like Vlad without sums is very weak. I think side laning is pretty important. So it's definitely a very unique and difficult champ. I do think he scales quite well though, and obviously he is hard to kill. And also a lot of low elo players don't know how to lane against Vlad. So from that perspective, I think he should go a little higher, but I don't know, like maybe about here. I still wouldn't really recommend Vlad for lower ranks, but he's not bad. If you're good at Vlad, he's really good, I think. He'll keep going. Xerath. Where did I put Xerath? Definitely better in lower ranks, I think, because people have less mobility, or like are just like not as good at using their movement speed and stuff. But very skill shot reliant, which is generally a bad thing. Like, you want to play things that just, can kind of throw your abilities out and not really think about it too much. I don't think he quite deserves to be in C tier, but I think he's very similar to Mel for me, where he just isn't as consistent damage-wise as these other champs. Maybe he's a little stronger than Ori's because he's easier. I don't know. I think about there is right. Somewhere in B tier anyway. Oh, this is exciting. Yasuo and Yone. Okay, Yasuo, very obvious, straight D tier. Champion is Thanos in lane, but is basically useless after that. Can only really side lane. One of the more difficult, both game plan and mechanical champs in the whole game, so I would definitely stay away from Yasuo. If you're going to play Yasuo, again, just don't, but if you're going to, pick it with Diana or Gragas or Rel or one of these champs that lets you team fight, because then at least you can group up and 5v5 something. Might be kind of useful. But yeah, I think quite hard. Yone is quite a bit easier than Yasuo, but still has some major problems. So with Yone, he he's kind of like Taliyah, actually, in some ways. Like, you've got defined winners of the game where you can and can't fight. So, from a mechanical sense, Yone is still kind of difficult, but way, way easier than Yasuo. The things to be careful of Yone are, like, fighting before Bork and being careful grouping up before Shield Bow, knowing how to side lane. I'd really recommend you guys watch my Yone video that I made a few months ago. And then I think you'll probably have quite a bit of success with him. Because he's definitely more blindable in lower ranks than he is in high ranks. So there is something to that. But I think that there's just a big knowledge requirement to start playing Yone. And if you guys don't know it, you will find yourself just being useless a lot of the time. So go watch my Yone video. Just shameless self-plug. Zed. Zed. I think Zed's probably an A, actually. So Zed has a pretty high skill cap for sure. But I think the Zed skill floor is not too bad. You can farm from range, quite hard to punish. Goes D-shield, scales pretty well. I think he's at least an A. There's still some easier things, right? Stuff like Pantheon, obviously Naafiri, but I could definitely see Zed being an A. He's quite a good champ for lower ranks, I feel like. Then we'll do Zoe. Ooh. Almost tempted to put Zoe in D tier for lower ranks. Skill shot reliant. Doesn't scale that well. She's an incredible snowballer. She's either at the bottom of C, similar to some of these champs, or just a straight D. I think I might put him in D, honestly, guys. Like, Zoe's a really, really hard champ to play, and it's just not anywhere near consistent enough compared to some of these other champs up here. Like, yeah, these champs are just so difficult, I think. Yeah, that's my take on Zoe. All right, we'll do Ziggs, and then we'll do some off-meta mid. So Ziggs, probably on the higher end of B. I want to say somewhere about there. He has just a lot of spammable abilities, kind of hard to punish in lane, but he is skill shot reliant. He is ultimately immobile, kind of reliant on landing poke and stuff before the fights. I could maybe see an argument for this being higher because he can just like group and fight really, which is nice. But I think just because he has the major skill shot component compared to a lot of these other champs up here, where they have either fake skill shots like Lux, or they just like don't have skill shots at all really, like fucking Brand and Malzahar, I think those are much, much easier to play. We'll probably rapid fire some off-meta champs. I'm not going to go super in-depth on anything unless it's, like, not obvious. Tanks like Cho and shit, really, really good, I think. Very simple to play, very hard to punish. They just, like, absolutely pop off. You could probably make the same argument for, like, all these things like Mundo. 80 carry mids would generally recommend staying away from them in lower ranks. Kind of difficult to play in general. Yeah, kind of difficult to play in general. Just, like, don't bring any utility, and they're not very good at skirmishing and stuff, so it's probably a little easier than some of these, but I would generally not go for 80 carry mids. Karma, again, really good, just AoE 5v5, very similar to Seraphine. Probably doesn't scale as well, so maybe not quite as good, but yeah, it's still insane. Shit like Garen is probably S. It probably should go higher, if I'm honest. Like, it's a very easy champ to play. And stuff like that, again, is really, really good. I think you can make the same argument, by the way, for a million different tanks. Like, you could play Malphite mid. You could probably play Maokai. You could play Nasus. I'm not going to put all of these on the list, but just know the tanks are very, very easy to play. Kennen, I think, yeah, good 5v5. A little harder to play, though. I think we'll put Kennen right about there. Could maybe go higher. I don't think I'll put Kayle on the list. I just don't think Kayle gets played mid enough. I don't know, if she's on the list, I don't think I'd put her particularly high. I think it'd be like a C tier probably. Nico I'll do, because a lot of people seem to play Nico. Probably B somewhere. Good 5v5, but ultimately kind of difficult champ to play. Probably similar to Aurora for me. Yeah, we'll put her right about there. Anything else that really needs to be on here? I won't put Nocturne. I won't put Quinn, Renekton, Rumble. I think, yeah, Sion, again, is another incredible tank. I might put Sion pretty high up. Put him high A, maybe. I think Sion's really good. Smolder, yeah, another 80 carry mid. Smolder's really good right now, so uniquely right now, Smolder might be higher on the list, but I think normally Smolder is pretty dog shit, unless, like, he does scale, which is a nice thing, but he's a hard champ to play. I guess I'll add Zillion. I think Zillion's pretty good. I think we'll put Zillion in A. Zillion is another champ that's gated by laning phase, and getting away with that makes him very, very strong lower ranks. I think maybe even should be higher than this. Yeah, maybe it should be even higher than this. Oh yeah, we can put Zyra on there. Zyra is very similar to Brand. I wouldn't be surprised if Zyra is an S, like high S too. I think Zyra is actually just like an underrated mid. Even I don't want to stay in the ultra high ranks, but I could see Zyra being pretty good in Diamond and stuff as well. I don't know. Is it actually better than Syndra stuff? Maybe not. although maybe. I don't know. She is easy. We'll put her about there. Why do you think that ADC mids are not good? Doesn't Cork and Smaller scale well? They do, but ADC mids don't bring any CC. They're not very good at skirmishing. They have kind of difficult laning phases into both mages and assassins. Like, you really, really need to know how to neutralize and play them properly, and it's just a complicated game plan. It's much easier to play something else. I think that's basically it. I mean, I could, like I said, I could put literally every tank on it, but I just want to kind of re-emphasize that all that really matters is ease of execution, easy AoE 5v5. And that can be tanks, it can just be like AoE bullshit. You know, even things like Sona mid are probably pretty good because they just bring lots of AoE aura abilities, which is nice. And generally champs that are going to be difficult in lower ranks are going to be things that need to snowball or that have like some complicated win condition or are just, you know, hard to play.